I knew something was wrong the moment HR asked me to step into the small conference room. No meeting on the 38th floor ever started that softly. Up there, conversations always had an echo: cold glass, cold marble, cold people. But this time, everything felt strangely warm, as if the walls themselves were preparing to wrap around me and squeeze. I sat down, and the head of HR, Melissa, gave me that tight, pitying smile people use when they've already decided your fate. Her fingers were trembling, but her voice wasn't. She read from a paper she didn't need. Restructuring, performance alignment, future-focused, energy fit. Every phrase was vague enough to mean nothing, and sharp enough to cut. But then she slipped. She said the real reason. Soft, careless, almost whispered. And, well, leadership feels the firm needs someone younger, someone with more longevity. Younger, that word hit harder than everything else combined. In one moment, 20 years of M&A deals, late-night strategy sessions, billion-dollar recoveries, and boardroom victories were reduced to the number on my birthday cake. I didn't say a word. Not because I was defeated, but because silence is the most dangerous thing a person can offer when they've just been pushed off a cliff. Melissa kept talking. Something about severance. Something about thank you for your service. I barely heard her. My mind wasn't in that room anymore. It was already moving through corridors, connecting dots, remembering things I wasn't supposed to remember because age wasn't the problem. I knew it. They knew it. The real problem was what I found last. Thursday at 3:14 p.m. a single internal memo that was never meant to cross my desk. A memo with numbers that didn't add up. A memo tied to a project the CFO swore didn't exist. A memo that hinted at something far bigger, far darker, and far more illegal than anything the board could imagine. I didn't bring it up in that room. I didn't defend myself. I just let them fire me, let them feel victorious, let them believe the story they wrote about me. They thought they were ending something. They had no idea they were lighting the fuse. By the time I left the conference room, the entire floor felt different, like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. People glanced at me, then looked away. Guilty eyes. Nervous eyes. Eyes that knew something wasn't right. I walked to my office one last time, took my mug, my notebook, my access card, and one more thing. The thing that would burn everything to the ground. They thought firing me at 11:08 a.m. would be the end of the story, but at 3 p.m., the first spark would ignite. And by 3:07, the entire firm would be on its knees. Because they chose the wrong woman to call too old. When I stepped out of the building, the cold air felt sharper than usual, almost electric, as if the city already sensed something shifting beneath its polished surface. Cars rushed by, people hurried in every direction, and yet I felt strangely detached from it all, like I was watching a world that had quietly decided I no longer belonged. But they were wrong. I belonged more than any of them. I had built half of what they now stood on. I didn't go home. I didn't even reach for my phone. Instead, I walked 2 blocks down, into a quiet cafe where the walls were lined with old oak shelves and the windows were fogged from the warmth inside. It was the only place in the city where my mind could think clearly. I took the same seat I always took when a deal was about to go sideways, the back corner, where no one could see my screen unless they leaned over the table. I opened my laptop, connected to my hotspot, and pulled up the file that had set everything in motion. A simple internal memo marked Appendix N, Updated Allocation Review. Harmless at first glance. But there was a number buried in the 4th paragraph that no one expected me to see. An adjustment of 42 million euros that had been moved from one subsidiary to another without explanation. Transfers like that didn't happen quietly. Not at a multinational investment firm. Not when the CFO had sworn under oath that all allocations for the quarter were finalized. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a cover-up, and I had proof of it. I didn't understand the full picture yet. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone very high up needed me out of the building before I connected the dots. and firing me for being too old. That was their panic speaking. I leaned back, letting the realization settle. Over 20 years in finance had taught me the anatomy of a corporate betrayal. It always started the same way, with whispers in the hallway, sudden calendar changes, and colleagues who once greeted you warmly suddenly becoming fascinated by the floor tiles. I had been noticing these signs for weeks, but I kept brushing them off, too focused on the $1.8 billion restructuring deal I had almost single-handedly saved. That deal had put me back on the radar. Too visible. Too valuable for the wrong people. And the memo? It wasn't an accident. It was a message, a warning that I wasn't meant to see. I closed my laptop and stared out the window as the barista called someone's name. My hands weren't shaking. My voice wasn't cracking. There was no panic, no fear, no grief. Just a strange, steady calm, as if I had finally stepped into the role I'd unknowingly been preparing for my entire career. They thought I was out of the building for good, but what they didn't know was that my silent backdoor into the system was still active, and in a few hours, when the firm finished patting itself on the back for removing dead weight, I would show them exactly what decades of experience, strategy, and quiet observation truly looked like. I gathered my things, zipped my coat, and walked back into the city's chaos with a single thought burning through me like fire. They didn't fire me. They freed me. By the time I reached home, the sky had already shifted into that dull gray that always reminded me of boardrooms, flat, tired, and pretending to be calm. I locked the door behind me, slipped off my coat, and sat at my dining table without turning on a single light. The quiet wrapped around me like a second skin. It was the kind of silence that helped you hear the truth, hiding underneath everything else. I opened my laptop again and logged into the firm's internal system through a backdoor I had built years ago. A harmless automation script, disguised as a compliance tool. No one ever questioned it because I had written it myself, and they trusted me. Ironically, it was the kind of trust they no longer believed I deserved. The dashboard loaded, and immediately a red flag blinked in the corner. Access attempts detected 214. P.M. Someone was trying to get into my files. Good. That meant they were nervous. I followed the trail, and the more I explored, the more my stomach tightened. Email deletions, calendar scrubs, file permissions rewired, all pointing to one person, CFO Adrian Holt. The same man who had insisted during last quarter's audit that all numbers were fully transparent. The 42 million euros transfer wasn't transparent. It was buried. Now he was trying to bury me with it. I clicked on a folder I hadn't opened in years: legacy contracts. Something most people forgot existed.
Inside it were old acquisition documents, dusty, untouched,
and irrelevant to anyone who didn't know exactly what to look for. But I did. I remembered the handwriting on paper margins, the little side notes made by partners who thought no one would ever read them. Those notes were clues, and I had mapped them all in my head long before today. I typed one keyword: Oak Tower. It was the name of a shell company that had appeared repeatedly in those margin notes. At the time, it meant nothing. But now, as the search results loaded, everything started aligning into a picture I wish wasn't real. Oak Tower wasn't dead. It was active. Very active, and 42 million euros had just passed through it. I scrolled deeper, my heart beating faster, not from fear but from recognition. This wasn't just corporate manipulation. This was fraud on a scale that could sink the firm. And the CFO knew I had come across the first breadcrumb. Firing me wasn't just retaliation. It was containment. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should stop digging. No greeting. No signature. No punctuation aside from the period that felt like a warning in itself. I stared at the screen, then slowly placed the phone face down on the table. They thought fear would stop me. They expected shock, maybe panic. But all it did was confirm something I had suspected from the moment HR recited that script in the small conference room. This wasn't about age. This was about survival, their survival, and I had become the one loose thread they couldn't afford to leave hanging. I opened the memo again. The one with the concealed transfer, and traced the flow of money until it hit another dead end. Another shell. Another empty name. It was like chasing shadows, except shadows didn't usually send anonymous threads to your phone. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a moment, and exhaled slowly. I could feel it now, the shift. The turning point in every long career where you realize you've stepped out of your old life and into something far more dangerous. They had taken my job today, but they had also given me clarity. And in less than an hour, the next move would belong to me. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It seeped in slowly like ink bleeding across a page until every memory, every conversation, every little moment I had once trusted was suddenly painted in a new, darker shade. I reopened my inbox archive through the back door. Thousands of emails, years of communication, compressed into cold lines of text. I filtered messages by sender. Adrian Holt, CFO. 319 emails. Most were routine, projections, risk assessments, updates. But one thread caught my eye: an old conversation between him, the CEO, and me, discussing the restructuring plan I had proposed 2 years ago. Adrian had praised my strategy back then. He called me indispensable.
He said I was the spine of this division.
Now I understood why, not because he valued me, but because he needed me. Back then. He wasn't powerful enough to move money without attracting questions. My expertise had acted as cover. My presence as a senior woman in M&A was a convenient shield, stable, respected, unnoticed in the way that only long-term employees can be. The kind of person who kept systems running without asking for attention. I scrolled down through his more recent messages. The tone shifted gradually. Professional. Became impatient. Impatient became dismissive. Dismissive. Became cold. And then in the last month, not a single email contained my name unless it was CC'd as an afterthought. He had already begun erasing me. I tapped into the firm's internal chat logs, not the official ones, but the archived backups I knew IT kept just in case. They weren't supposed to be accessible from outside the network, but my script had quietly mirrored them for years. Just another precaution I'd built in the days when I still believed I needed to protect the firm from external threats. Funny how the threat had been inside the whole time. I searched my own name. Several group chats appeared. I opened the most recent thread, dated 3 days before they fired me. My stomach tightened. Team chat, finance strategy. Adrian. She's digging again. We need to fast track this before she connects anything. CEO Martin. Is she aware of Oak Tower? Adrian. Not sure. But she's asking too many questions. We should proceed with the exit plan? Martin. Age justification. Adrian. Yes. HR already drafted it. Martin. Good. Get her out by end of week. I felt my jaw clench. It was the moment. They chose to sacrifice me. Not because I was old. Not because I was underperforming, but because I was too close to the truth. I read the messages again, slower this time, each word sinking deeper into me like ice. I could almost hear their voices, calm, confident, untouchable, planning my removal. Like it was nothing more than moving a piece on a board. Another thread. Another conversation, this time between Adrian and the head of HR. She asked for reasons. Legally, we can't reference age. Adrian. Just hint at longevity. She get the message. HR. If she pushes back? Adrian. She won't. She's too reasonable. Something inside me snapped at those words too. Reasonable. They had mistaken my composure for compliance. My silence for surrender. My professionalism for weakness. The final blow came when I opened one more file, a draft version of the memo that started this entire unraveling. The 42 million euros transfer was there. But in an earlier draft it was 58 million euros. They had already attempted to hide the first version. But buried in the metadata were comments. Adrian. Reduce amount. 42M is less suspicious. Martin. She still questioned it. Adrian. Not after Friday. Friday. The day they fired me. My hands tightened around the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened. Betrayal wasn't a single act. It was a quiet accumulation. Tiny pieces that didn't hurt until you saw them. Together, and now I saw everything, all the late nights. All the weekends, all the deals I saved at the last second, all used against me, my loyalty turned into a weapon, my experience twisted into a threat. I had spent 2 decades protecting the firm, and the firm had repaid me with a knife between the ribs, but betrayal has a strange way of clarifying things. Once you see the truth, you stop fearing it. I closed all the windows on my screen, sat back, and let the betrayal settle, not as pain anymore, but as resolve. A steady, controlled fire began building in my chest. Not rage. Something sharper, precision, because now I wasn't just uncovering fraud. I was exposing the men who tried to erase me, and the deeper I dug, the clearer the path became. They wanted me gone, so I wouldn't connect the dots, now. Piece by piece, I would connect every single one and make sure each line led back to them. Revenge, at least the kind that leaves a mark, never starts with fury. Fury is loud, messy, and short-lived. What I felt as I stared at those chat logs wasn't rage, it was clarity. A quiet, surgical kind of clarity. The kind that whispers rather than shouts. The kind that builds plans brick by calculated brick. I opened a fresh document on my laptop, not to write notes, but to map out the anatomy of their downfall. Everything I needed was already in my head. 20 years in M, and it teaches you to see patterns in chaos, to follow money through walls, to recognize when a number has been bent until it breaks. And now that I'd uncovered their threads, I knew exactly how to pull first. I listed the pressure points.
Adrian CFO, Martin CEO, Melissa HR 3.
People, 3 cracks in the foundation, 3 vulnerabilities, but destroying them wouldn't be enough, not if the firm simply replaced them and went on with its polished smile. No. My revenge had to be cleaner. Bigger. Collapse that didn't just shake the top floor, it had to send tremors through every level until the building itself questioned its own structure. So I began with the one thing corporate leaders fear most. Their own signatures. I navigated to the compliance archive, where thousands of contracts lived in sterile rows. They thought I didn't have access anymore. They thought revoking my ID badge would shut me out. But systems don't forget the people who built them. My script bypassed the permissions like slipping through a door. I'd left cracked open years ago. There it was. Oak Tower Holdings. Historical documents. Most were scanned PDFs. Blurry and old. But metadata doesn't blur. Metadata remembers. And hidden in the metadata were timestamps that didn't match the signatures. Digital fingerprints that proved documents had been edited after they were locked. Edits made during the CFO's late-night sessions, the ones he told the board were routine reconciliations.
He wasn't reconciling, he was rewriting history. I saved every anomaly.
Every inconsistency, every digital bruise in a neat, encrypted folder. Not in my laptop. Not on the cloud. But on a secure drive routed through a private server I'd set up long ago, a server registered under a foundation name that no one could trace back to me. Then came phase 2. The allies. People often forget that power isn't held by titles. It's held by those who keep the machine running, the analysts, the auditors, the forgotten faces who notice things others dismiss. I still knew several of them. People who respected me, people who trusted me, people who whispered, something is wrong. On days when they thought no one could hear, I reached out carefully. Not with accusations, not with drama, just small, precise questions. Did you ever see unusual transfer logs last quarter? Was the risk committee meeting canceled at the last minute again? Has Adrian been requesting off-calendar revisions? Within an hour, my phone began buzzing with responses. Screenshots. Concerns. Silent. Confirmations. One message stood out from a junior auditor named Lee. Sharp as glass and twice as dangerous when she wanted to be. I can't say much yet, but the last Oak Tower audit was flagged. The system buried it. Not me. Double quotes, buried, just like me. She didn't know the whole picture. But she had seen enough to know something was rotten deep inside the firm's elegant walls. Phase 3 was the real strike. The board. People Adrian believed were safely in his pocket. I drafted an anonymous report clean. Clinical, supported by data. No emotional language. No accusations that could be dismissed as bitterness from a terminated employee. Just patterns, timelines, document trails, and financial discrepancies that pointed to one undeniable truth. Someone at the top was moving money that had no business being moved. Then I timed it. Slow release. One automated file drop every 30 minutes. Sent from an untraceable source, directly to each board member's private encrypted mailbox. Not fast enough to panic them, but steady enough that by the third file, they wouldn't be able to breathe. But the final piece of my plan, the one that would ignite everything at exactly 3 p.m., wasn't for the board. It wasn't even for the CEO or CFO. It was for the regulators. A single packet of evidence. Time-stamped, cross-verified, impossible to ignore. Not an accusation, just enough anomalies to trigger a mandatory audit. And once the audit started, nothing, no charm, no excuses. No age-based firing could stop the collapse. I sat back and checked the clock, 2:42. P.M. Everything was in place. Every file. QUED. Every trigger prepared. Every protective layer around me sealed tight. They thought I was done. An afterthought. Discarded piece of the past. But revenge. Real revenge. Isn't about getting even. It's about rewriting the story so completely that the people who erased you find themselves erased instead. And at 3 p.m., their story would begin to burn. I watched the red numbers on my private clock tick toward 3 p.m. through the little webcam feed I'd hidden inside the cafe's window frame. The street outside blurred into motion, taxi cabs, suited executives, lunchtime pedestrians, but for me, every second was razor-sharp. At 2:59 p.m., I took a steady breath, closed my eyes for a moment, and whispered, "Let's go." Then I hit send on the first packet. It wasn't loud, but it was devastating. The first board member's secure email pinned with a heavily encrypted zip, internal audit logs, Oak Tower documentation, time-stamped contracts with metadata showing fraudulent post-signature edits. No commentary. Just the raw files, organized and undeniable. 30 seconds later, the second packet went out. Then another. Each drop was timed like the chords of a symphony, building tension, layering data, until there was no hiding under the smooth corporate facade anymore. Simultaneously, through a different channel, I triggered the regulator's submission. It went to a European financial oversight unit, a sealed, encrypted dossier with clear evidence of intercompany cash flows, shell company mismatches, and board-level complicity. While the regulator's system accepted the document, I opened my laptop. Keyed into the firm's internal alert system, my backdoor script still running, and pulled up the chat log I'd captured. Adrian instructing HR to hint at longevity. Messages planning my ouster. I broadcast that log to the board members via the same secure email. Chain. At 3:04 p.m. Another message. Confirm receipt. Please acknowledge. Within minutes, replies started arriving. Pings from board members using their private devices, not the firm's regular system. They were reading. They were worried. But the most devastating moment came at 3:07 p.m., exactly 7 minutes after my first drop. Suddenly my phone rang. Not an anonymous number. Not a burner. It was Lee, the junior auditor. They called me into a meeting. The internal audit's being reopened. The CFO's being questioned. The board is in crisis mode. Her voice was calm, but her words burned through me like a spotlight. I closed my laptop, put it in my bag, and stood up. I watched in my webcam feed as a server in the cafe blinked, a tiny light that mirrored my own heartbeat. On the street outside, nothing looked different. But inside the firm, chaos was unspooling faster than I could have hoped. I allowed myself the smallest, strangest smile, because for once I wasn't hidden. I wasn't cornered. I wasn't the one being erased. I was the one who had written the final chapter. A minute later, another ping, a board member response, urgent, curt, frantic. What is this? Explain now. Another, internal counsel demands an emergency session. In the regulator system, my file landed in a queue for immediate review. Someone was pulling up related shell company records. Someone was asking questions. Someone was tracing Oak Tower's ownership. At 3:12 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number, but familiar enough. Well done. We see you. That was all. Just 6 little words. But it felt like applause. I closed my laptop, zipped my bag, and slipped out of the cafe. My reflection in the window looked different now, sharper, focused, real. I didn't rush. I didn't run. I walked. Because justice, when done cold, doesn't need speed. It just needs precision. By the time I reached the street corner, I had already won. They had underestimated me. They had misjudged me. But most importantly, they had forgotten one thing. Experience isn't a burden. It's a weapon. And no matter how old they thought I was, still knew how to pull the trigger. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of clarity. The kind of clarity that settles in your chest when the storm finally passes and all that's left is the quiet truth. By morning, the board had already removed Preston from every internal system. His biography vanished from the company website like he had never existed. When I arrived, employees stood in small clusters, whispering, wide-eyed, like the building itself had woken up different. The moment I stepped through the glass doors, people parted without realizing it. Not because I was intimidating, but because they finally saw me. Months of condescension, the constant questioning of my worth, the whispers about my age, it all evaporated in that single, surreal walk across the lobby. For the first time, no one looked past me. No one dismissed me. Their eyes held something new, fear in some, respect in others, and in a few, quiet admiration. Upstairs, the boardroom was warm with sunlight. The same room where Preston had once sneered at me now felt like neutral ground. Chairs were rearranged, papers neatly stacked, the chaos from last night already cleaned up. But they hadn't touched the empty seat at the far end, the one he used to occupy like a throne. The interim director, a sharp and steady woman named Amelia, waited for me. There was a softness in her expression I hadn't seen in leadership here for a long time. "We owe you an apology," she said, not performative, not forced. "And more than that, we owe you the truth." She slid a folder toward me, my performance record, the real one. Not the manipulated version Preston had crafted. Numbers clean. Deals successful. Metrics glowing. He hadn't fired me for performance. He fired me because he saw me climbing, and he was terrified I would reach the rung he'd been clinging to with bloodless fingers. "We'd like you to stay," she said quietly. "In fact, we'd like to discuss a promotion. Something permanent." My heart didn't leap. It didn't race. It simply settled. Because the victory wasn't the offer, it was knowing. I didn't need it to validate the war I'd survived. I looked at the empty chair again. I didn't want his seat. I wanted my own. And now I finally had it. "Let's talk," I said. And the room exhaled with me. But even then, before the next chapter began, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real reckoning wasn't over yet. Because Preston wasn't the only one who had tried to push me out. The quiet ones, the ones who hid behind him, the ones who smiled while sharpening their knives. Their day was coming. If this journey taught me anything, it's that power doesn't disappear when someone tries to take it from you. Sometimes it only grows sharper in the dark. I spent months believing I was being pushed out because I was fading, because maybe they were right. Maybe I was becoming too old, too quiet, too careful. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. People fear what they can't control. And I had become someone they couldn't predict, couldn't manipulate, couldn't silence. The real victory wasn't Preston's downfall. It was remembering who I was before the doubt crept in. Strength isn't loud. It's steady. It's patient. It's the courage to rise even when someone tries to bury you. And in the end, every buried truth finds its way back to the surface.